Chris Level of Locked On Texas Tech. Level, the Tech strategy last year felt different, obviously. Number 1, number 2 recruiting class in the country in the transfer portal. This year, once again, top 10. Was it one and the same? Hey, let's do the exact same thing that helped us win in 2025, or did Tech take a different approach in its transfer portal class if you put a microscope on top of this?
It was similar. However, the one outlier is your biggest ticket item was just not one that you would have foreseen that you would have needed, except for another tough injury to Will Hammond. When that injury happens, you have to alter the course of exactly how this is going to play out, because you all of a sudden need a quarterback, the most expensive and the most important position on your team. But I think whether they'll end up being right or not, but they got exactly the guy that they wanted. They brought a Texas guy back home. I think they feel like that Brendan Sorsby will be a great fit. I think that the one thing that he does that Behren Morton couldn't do is he can run the ball. He's a running threat. They had a lot of red zone issues last year offensively, and this is a quarterback that now you must respect it. He averaged, or I guess I should say, he rushed for like 600 yards last year and like 9 touchdowns. So that was the biggest draw to them. Plus, he was a Texan, and I think there was some relationships there from his high school days with some of the staff, and that's just where it took them. But the prevailing thought of loading up on the trenches and spending their money on big people, specifically defensive line, that was the same as from a year ago. I don't think you're going to be able to add Romello Height and David Bailey every year. Those guys, I would say those are 10s. I think in this case with like Trey White and Adam Trick, I think they were all top portal guys. I think those are maybe closer to 8.5s, but I think that they beefed up their interior. They added, I think, 4 defensive tackles to add to A.J. Holmes, who was an All-American. And so that's where – and then they added what will probably be a starting offensive lineman in Jordan Church that was one of the best run blockers in the portal. And so that's where the expenses came from. That's where they felt like gives them an advantage. And so that's very similar to the year before, yes.
If you were to tell me 2 years ago that Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, and Arizona State were the top 3 teams in the Big 12 in the transfer portal, I'd have a lot of questions. I'd need a lot answered. But now, it made sense for Oklahoma State, the way they recruited the North Texas kids. Arizona State, now a contender after that championship. They want to play like in the transfer portal. For Texas Tech, where does it put the Red Raiders in the Big 12 next season? As you give an outlook on the 16 teams in the conference, should they be the clear favorite?
I think they probably are the favorite. I think that BYU will be interesting. Now, obviously, they just took a hit with their team that they can't do anything about in Parker Kingston. I think Houston is going to be a sneaky good team with a lot back, and they did obviously very well in the portal. I do think I've known Eric Morris for a long time. I think Oklahoma State, it may take them a bit. I worry about them defensively, not offensively, but I obviously, what did they add? Like 50-something new players, and that's hard to mesh that together. But they have a head start because a lot of those guys are not new guys. They're just new to Stillwater. They're not new to Eric Morris and what he wants to get done. I think you mentioned Arizona, both the Arizona schools, I think could be interesting. But it has been interesting what Texas Tech did in the portal, because I think it's kind of, I don't know if I would term it that it's woken everybody up, but it's kind of, there's opportunity there. And I think it's obviously allowed some coaches and staffs to kind of rally support where they are to say, this is what it's going to take. And I think that there's more folks in the Big 12 starting to jump in at a higher level. And I think you're right. I mean, seeing Oklahoma State of all places, which, Mike Gundy was so against the new way of doing things, which is why there's obviously been a change and all that. Seeing them at the top of the portal rankings in the Big 12 is certainly interesting to see. But this is what it takes this day and age. But I think had you not been able to add somebody like Sorsby, I think Sorsby is somebody that I think many will perceive as that gives you a difference maker at that position. Then I would wonder about if you were just hoping that Will Hammond would be able to come back. But I think Brendan Sorsby is like, that's what people feel. Say your defense isn't quite as good, but Brendan Sorsby should be a bit of a difference maker at quarterback, and maybe that makes up for some of that. So maybe you only win games by 15 points, on average instead of 20. I don't know. I mean, we don't know what we're going to get, but Sorsby was the difference. And if you're picking Texas Tech to win or contend for the Big 12 championship, I'd be willing to bet you that he's a major, major reason why.
Something a lot of Big 12 fans may be overlooking about Texas Tech is Jake Spavital, when he was the head coach at Texas State, was pretty clear he was not going to recruit Texas high school kids, which is the worst thing you can say as a head coach, football coach in Texas. McGuire's the opposite. I mean, he's a guy who, I think you've mentioned this, Coach Gary Patterson, before he took the USC job. We talked about it. He'll offer a kid out of high school $300,000 when Penn State will only offer $150,000 or Bama will only offer $150,000, hoping that kid stays in the Tech program and you grow him up in Lubbock. Is that the case right now? What does it look like, high school recruiting for Texas Tech in that class coming in?
Yeah, Drake, I think Joey has never wavered from the fact they're going to – and I think what they're doing now is they're trying to recruit more high-end players and maybe not as deep of a class. I mean, you're not seeing the 25-member recruiting class from a high school standpoint. That's why these portal classes have been larger than what Coach McGuire would have thought, because some of your – developmental guys that are been on campus for a year or two are going, okay, I don't see a path to playing time here. I'm out. So you lost 20 plus guys, but none of them had really played much. And maybe they'll go off and do great things. You had some of that last year. But I think that they've added a 5-star freshman in LaDamian Guyton that should factor in at defensive end. They've added Felix Ojo, who's a 5-star offensive tackle that may be a year or two away from. But yeah, they're definitely very much still invested in the high school aspect of it. Just maybe more higher end guys. I think that's the way that they view it too. Is that okay? Portal, we're spending on big people. High school recruiting, we in the state of Texas, you can get receivers and skill players and DBs. They're all over the place in the state. So if you're going to spend for these premium positions like edge or offensive tackle, maybe a wideout, maybe a quarterback, maybe this or that, but mainly it's going to be on these big folks, because right now Jalen Brewster, #1 player in the country, is a defensive tackle from Cedar Hill, where Joey coached high school and won state championships. He's committed to them, and he plays defensive tackle. He's 300 plus, and so that's just their philosophy. Again, if you're going to spend big, it's going to be on big people. Mass kicks ass, as I think the head coach says.
I would rather have a 3-star from Canyon than a 3-star from anywhere in Alabama. Just your margin for error in that ranking system. You can have plenty of guys who slip through the cracks and end up being really good college football players. Texas Tech does a great job at it. Chris Level at Locked On Texas Tech. Find him every single day. Again, LockedOnTexasTech.supercast.com as well to become an everydayer. That's Chris Level. Drake Toll with you. This has been, it always will be, a crossover. Locked On Texas Tech and Dose Grande.